It's the Solemnity of the Annunciation of the Lord 2017 here on the University of Mary campus, and we've been honored to have with us for the past couple of days Mr. George Weigel, the premier biographer of Pope St. John Paul II. George, thanks for being here, and I'm just interested in hearing some of your impressions of your visit to our campus thus far.
Well, it's been great to be here, Monsignor, and I thank you and your staff for inviting me and your students for welcoming me so handsomely. I've watched the growth of this school for the past several years with great interest, and I really believe that you are creating here a model for what Catholic higher education in the future in the United States should be. That future is one of formation as well as education, so that the whole young man or young woman is addressed by their 4 or how many years here at the University of Mary. I think the fact that you offer these students a rich liturgical life is very important. An opportunity for vocational discernment, thinking through, pondering, wrestling, also important. And then there's the natural beauty of the surrounding. This is an interesting part of the United States with a somewhat turbulent history, but this oasis of Christian fidelity and peace is a fine place to spend some time when you're a young person thinking through what it is you ought to do with your life.
George, you've commented in the past on the great legacy of Catholic higher education in this country. It is the case that the United States has more Catholic colleges and universities than any other place. It's been a big project here. At the same time, there's been a dissipation over the course of the last 40 or so years. I'm wondering if you might comment on some of the causes of that, and then maybe the ingredients for renewal. During your time among us, you've talked about a new great awakening and the role of Catholic higher education in that, and I'm interested in hearing some of your thoughts along those lines.
Well, we can take that in pieces. What's happened over the past several generations, I think, really begins in the mid-1950s, when Monsignor John Tracy Ellis, longtime teacher of church history at Catholic University, published an article called Catholic Intellectual Life Today, which was a rather brutal critique of the state of Catholic higher education in the United States. I think that critique was misread by many people. I do not believe Monsignor Ellis, whom I knew in the last years of his life, was calling for Catholic higher education to imitate what was going on in Harvard, Yale, Columbia, etc. I think he was calling Catholic higher education to play to its strengths, which are classic liberal arts education, the formation of the whole person, and the active meeting of faith and reason at a time when, in American higher education as a whole, the idea of reason was becoming increasingly instrumental and pragmatic, and the idea of faith was simply dropping out of the picture. There's a famous joke we have in the First Things world, the surround of the journal First Things, about the changes in Harvard's coat of arms.
Right.
It used to say Veritas in Christo et Ecclesia.
Right.
Truth in Christ and the Church. Then it went to Veritas. Christ and the Church dropped out. And the joke was that they were just simply going to put a question mark after Veritas in the next iteration of this. That is certainly not what John Tracy Ellis had in mind. But beginning in, I think it was 1967, so 50 years ago, the Land O'Lakes statement. Was that 66 or 67? Right. Somewhere in there. A group of high-bouncing Catholic higher education people led by Father Ted Hesburgh from Notre Dame essentially declared the Catholic college and university's independence from the institutional church in the name of a kind of autonomy that they imagined would allow them to play in the big leagues, to be Princeton, Harvard, Duke, Stanford, whatever. There was an important point there. Catholic colleges and universities needed to dial it up several notches in terms of academic excellence. But the implication that there was a tension between intellectual seriousness of a high caliber and Catholic fidelity was false. And Land O'Lakes and what came out of that in the transformation of Catholic higher education was based on that false premise, or at least lived that out. Moreover, here are these people saying at this nice resort in Wisconsin, let's be like Harvard, Berkeley, Stanford, Cornell, at exactly the time Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, Cornell were literally losing their minds. We're going crazy in the radicalism of the 60s, followed by the postmodernism of there's your truth and my truth, but nothing called the truth. Following that path has led some Catholic institutions of higher education, some traditionally Catholic institutions of higher education, so far astray that in my view they simply can't be considered Catholic in anything but the most vestigial sense. Others, by contrast, have discovered the truth that John Paul II taught in his Apostolic Constitution on Catholic higher education, Ex Corde Ecclesiae. The university comes out of the heart of the church. The Catholic Church invented the university in the high Middle Ages. I mean, those were the days you could choose between Bonaventure and Thomas Aquinas in Paris for your theology professor. We know how to do this. And we can do it in a way that touches all of the dimensions of the human person, not just the pragmatic, the utilitarian, etc. So the mission of Catholic higher education in the future in the U.S. is nothing less than to rescue the notion of the university, which has now become shrunken, diminished, very career-oriented.
I think of Cardinal George at Georgetown talking about the danger of becoming high-tech technical training schools. And he said, I mean that not as an insult. There's a place for that, but that's not the idea of a university in terms of the integration of knowledge.
I think Cardinal George was right about just about everything, and that was one of the things he was right about. I find this disturbingly widespread, this notion that you've got to do what we used to call in the 50s the high price spread, that ad for whatever margarine that was. That your kid has to do the high price spread in order to make it in 21st century America. I mean, I was speaking at two very high-end Catholic prep schools, one in the Midwest, one in the Northeast, about a year ago. And the parents were insisting that if the kid did not go to Duke or Stanford or whatever, they were way behind in their career development. And I said, I'm sorry, that's simply not true. My two daughters went to the University of Dallas, which I still think has the most demanding undergraduate curriculum in the United States. Not Chicago, Dallas is the most demanding. They both got a terrific undergraduate education. My older daughter waltzed into Johns Hopkins Medical School, and my younger daughter went to New York University for a master's degree in arts education and is now the education coordinator at a major arts center.
Don't you think the genes were involved in their brilliance too?
Well, their mother's genes were.
Oh, okay.
But no, I can point to a lot of kids in their classes who are doing solid classical liberal arts education.
Right, with moral investment.
Which
in
moral
the students.
investment and formation, which gives you the sense of yourself as the legate of a civilization. You know, this prepares you for anything.
Yeah.
And you can go do nuclear physics after that,
Yeah.
or civil engineering, or whatever. But first become a mature human being. And as long as Catholic higher education offers young people perhaps not the whole of their curriculum in the liberal arts, but a solid core that is carefully thought out, laid out, and required,
Right.
then it will be doing a great service, not only to business and the professions, but to the church and the culture. I did, at one of these prep schools, which is run by a community of monks, I met with the monks the next day, coffee in the
Sure.
common room. And they said, this is a big problem, this thing you talked about last night. How do we get these parents to understand this? I said, well, here's a dramatic idea. You buy the parents of every incoming senior a paperback edition of Tom Wolfe's I Am Charlotte Simmons,
Oh.
which is a novel about the corruption of a young woman
Mm-hmm.
going to a high-end school from a simple
Right.
background. And what's critically important, the book is very raw, but it's also true in terms of its depiction of the mode of life on many
Right.
campuses. And I said, what you have to point out to these parents is that it's the intellectual corruption that precedes the moral corruption.
Right.
This girl goes into a philosophy class where she's taught that there is no such thing as the truth, and that's what softens her up to get hit on by the basketball guy or the
Right.
lacrosse guy or whatever the heck he was.
This is extremely
In the book,
important
yeah.
because I think oftentimes we mistake, because the errors, the wounds of our time have such moral import. We mistake them for primarily moral wounds instead of intellectual wounds.
Yeah.
And so the role of a university, of course, is to address some of the intellectual wounds in that sense. And so those stand, as you say, as you're implying, they stand at the base of much of the chaos.
Now, you can go to the high price spread schools and get a reasonable education
Mm-hmm.
and come out a serious Catholic. I happen to know, as a former student, a remarkable young woman named Aurora Griffin who graduated
Yeah, she
from
just wrote a book.
Harvard, how to go to Harvard and stay Catholic.
Right.
Good book to give to parents and kids, because it's not just about Harvard, it's really about any place. But Aurora went to Harvard as a well-formed
Yeah.
young woman, and she knew how to maneuver, particularly in the lifestyle world
Mm-hmm.
of decadence. And the basic maneuver is to get out of it. I mean, to
Right.
find some community. I think Opus Dei runs, for example, houses for both men and women,
Mm-hmm.
undergraduates at Harvard. Okay, so you can do that, and you can do the Harvard thing as well. But the odds are better on the young man or woman getting a serious integral Catholic education at a place like this, or Dallas, or Benedictine down in Atchison, Kansas, or Christendom, or wherever, or at a big state university with a vibrant Catholic campus ministry.
Sure.
I mean, I look at what the present Bishop of Tulsa, Bishop David Conderla, helped build when he was the chaplain at Texas A&M.
Right.
I mean, if you ask, you're the man from Mars, and you ask yourself, where's the most dynamic Catholic campus ministry in the United States? Texas A&M is not where you would start looking, and yet it is.
Right.
I mean, there are 10,000 Catholic students on that campus, and 3 great chaplains in a row, all of whom trained at your alma mater, the North
Sure.
American College,
And lots of vocations.
have produced a vocation factory, both men and women, some great marriages, a vibrant university parish that itself is a great Catholic witness in the middle of the Bible Belt.
Right. What do you discern as a blueprint that sort of runs through these different institutions that we're talking about? In other words, what are the ingredients for authentic renewal, or for putting together an ethos in which students can flourish intellectually, morally, spiritually, etc.?
Well, I think you have to begin with John Paul II.
That's a great idea.
And his letter to the Preparatory Commission for the Second Vatican Council, when he said that the Western humanistic project has gone off the rails in the past 300 years. And the result of that, the decline, the replacement of metaphysics at the center of intellectual life, natural science is the only paradigm of knowledge. The only thing you can know is through the experimental method, or tautologies in math, etc. Theology regarded as a subset of mythology. All of this has resulted over 3 centuries in a terribly diminished view of the human person. So the first thing you have to recognize to begin this process of renewal is that the high-price spread schools are wrong. That they're fundamental.
Anthropology.
They're wrong about anthropology, they're wrong about metaphysics, they're wrong about the epistemology, the nature of knowledge. They're wrong. They've simply gotten it wrong, and their refusal to even engage in argument about maybe something has gone wrong here is a sign of their intellectual decay.
But they're places of diversity, they're places of the free exchange of ideas.
But they're not, because the diversity does not extend to Orthodox Christians. The diversity does not extend to people who believe that Adam and Eve can get married, but Adam and Steve getting married is just a false idea, which will make for human unhappiness. We see what happened to Charles Murray at Middlebury College a couple of weeks ago. I mean, violent protests against one of perhaps the 3 leading social scientists in the United States, explaining why some people aren't making it in America and what we can do about that to help. I mean, this is barbarism. This is barbarism. This is what John Courtney Murray called 60 years ago the barbarian in a Brooks Brothers suit.
Oh, wow.
Although in this case it's a barbarian in Birkenstocks and an Under Armour t-shirt. The Brooks Brothers suit went a long time ago.
Right.
But it's still barbarism. And I don't see how serious intellectual life, much less serious human formation, can go on in an atmosphere in which ill-educated 19-year-olds are allowed to run riot, literally. I mean, this just doesn't work. And that parents are willing to pay $60,000 to $75,000 for this a year is simply insane.
But the source of the running riot oftentimes comes from the ethos of the place where they're at. How did we come to a point of this lack of self-reflectiveness, where diversity is a watchword, but it's not extended to all ideas? And how can we, in Catholic higher education, be attentive or vigilant about protecting ourselves from that type of infectious contradiction?
The latter is, I think, a bit simpler and shorter to answer. Ex Corde Ecclesiae is one of the really great teaching documents and a pontificate of great teaching documents from John Paul II. And I think the institution in which faculty, staff, administration, and students read that, talk about it together, ask how well they're living it, is off to a very, very good start. The other thing that I think Catholic universities bring to this problem is the abandonment of the notion in loco parentis by university administrations. We're standing in the place of parents. The utter abandonment of that has created a free fire zone of decadence of all sorts. You know, you have these campuses where kids are paying $65,000 to $75,000 a year, have huge drinking problems, huge problems of abusive sexual behavior, and all the rest. You cannot put volatile young people together without any supervision in a cultural environment that says if it itches, scratch it, and expect something other than this. What Catholic universities offer is not so much in loco parentis, but in loco Christi, in the place of Christ. We are here in persona Christi, in the broadest sense, to help you form the full human person, soul and heart as well as mind. And that's got to be part of the package.
Right.
And that means mode of life on campus. I mean, one of the reasons I would say, to take an example where I live, there is no way that Georgetown University can be considered a Catholic institution in anything but a vestigial sense. Not only has to do with what goes on in the theology department, or the ratio of Catholics to non-Catholics on the faculty, it primarily has to do with mode of life on campus. I mean, Georgetown has one of the biggest historic binge drinking problems of any top-tier university in the country. There's a reason for that.
So Cardinal Newman, when he was founding the Catholic University of Ireland, talked about the university and the collegiate principle and how those two things need to go together. Of course, that forms a base for our Catholic Studies project here.
Right.
I wonder if you could say a word about the importance of Catholic Studies in terms of the integration of a university community.
Well, one of the pieces of good news over the past 20 years has been the development of what initially seemed paradoxical. What are we doing with a Catholic Studies program at a Catholic university? Why isn't the whole university a Catholic Studies program? Well, okay, insofar as many Catholic universities have become multiversities, you need some reactor core of integral Catholicism within the curriculum and the program of human formation. And that's what Catholic Studies intends to do. Form the Catholic mind, form the Catholic spirit, form the Catholic heart, because service is very much part of all this. It's not just brain candy and soul candy.
Right.
It's getting out there and getting your hands dirty. And this, I think this is also the model, that Catholic Studies model, which your colleague Don Briel has done more to develop than anyone, I think has now begun to have a serious effect in campus ministry on state university campuses.
Right. Our project at Arizona State
Your
University.
project at Arizona State, what's going on down the road in Nebraska, both in Lincoln and in Omaha. These are Catholic centers
Right.
in the full sense. Residential, formation, liturgical, spiritual direction. And when you have a state university administration and a legislature that hasn't lost its mind, as those in my part of the world have, you can then begin to offer academic programs out of these places that a sensible university president will recognize amplifies the program that he or she is responsible for. So you get courses in Augustine, Aquinas, whatever, out of these campus ministries that are accredited, and kids can make this part of their degree program.
For instance, down at Arizona State, Michael Crow, who's the president of ASU,
Right.
when we read his strategic plan and when we heard him talking about what it would take to form the new American university, we asked whether he really meant it. And the hospitality that he's offered to us. ASU has opened wide its doors, and he said publicly, that the presence of the University of Mary on our campus doing Catholic studies and theological studies is really important because they're offering things and intentional community that we're not able to offer. That type of open-minded clarity is very rare.
It is rare, and it's unfortunately rare, and it's rare in part because of 60 years of fouled up jurisprudence on the Supreme Court about the First Amendment and the nature of what it says about no establishment of religion, which is my dear friend, the late Father Richard John Newhouse, said only makes sense in terms of the free exercise of religion.
Right.
Why do you have no establishment? So you have free exercise. And I think ASU has figured this out, and the Arizona legislature hasn't gotten in the way. That would be very hard to do in the state of Maryland right now, for example, although there's no reason not to at least try. I think the other challenge that I know you're trying to address with ASU is the economic challenge.
Yeah.
There is a real danger that Catholic universities, Catholic colleges are pricing themselves out of the market, particularly as the demographics of Catholicism in the United States change. This next wave of immigrant families, largely from Spanish-speaking countries, is not going to be able to afford what was affordable when I was a kid or you were a kid, because we're third, fourth, fifth generation people. So that's going to have to be addressed somehow. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. But it's terribly important to grow the Catholic university world in the United States in depth as well as width. The growth can't simply be lateral. We've got more stuff. We've got more programs. We offer more degrees. It has to be growth in depth if the Catholic University is going to be part of the new evangelization and is going to equip these young people to be missionary disciples who are countercultural for the sake of converting the culture.
Right. One of the problems with the aftermath of Land O'Lakes in terms of trading in one's identity or one's mission for prestige is that then all of a sudden you need to bolster or marshal all of these resources to do very expensive things. Tuition shoots up and you're no longer serving immigrant populations. And so when we think about, for instance, our project at Arizona State University, we realize that we're poised to serve first generation low-income students who are coming to this country and who in many ways are the future of the church here.
Yeah.
And so that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the serious corruptions of American higher education. 20 years ago, I don't know what it is today, but 20 years ago, I believe this number is accurate, Stanford University had 120 full-time fundraisers. Harvard today has a endowment, I believe, over $40 billion. That is tax-free money. Why is Harvard not required to offer free tuition? Why is Harvard allowed to charge tuition under those circumstances? I mean, we don't tax certain things because we think they fulfill a public function.
Right.
I've lived my whole professional life in the nonprofit world. I'm all for nonprofit donation, full deductibility. But when people give to the Ethics and Public Policy Center, we're not squirreling it away.
Yeah.
We're using it for public good.
We don't do that here either, right?
Yeah, but at Harvard they do. And why that is really, I think it's bad public policy. It's bad educational policy. And it's ultimately corrupting. It turns the university into a bank of some sort or other. And banks have their purposes, but universities aren't banks.
Well, for the record, George, you're sitting on the campus of the most affordable Catholic university in America.
There we go.
And when our friend Cardinal Dolan was here, he said that the tuition here is the cost of a steak and 2 martinis in Manhattan.
Well, given Cardinal Dolan's propensity for steak and martinis, I hope that's not true.
Sure. I wanted to talk just a little bit with you about Pope St. John Paul II.
Sure.
When I read through Ex Cordia Ecclesiae, he has that very small line at the very beginning, which is always deeply moving to me because it's so packed with meaning, where he says, I myself was deeply influenced by time spent in university settings.
Yeah.
And I think of his time at the Angolonian University, his chaplaincy at St. Florian's, his professorship at Lublin. Talk just a little bit about the influence of the university on the person of John Paul II.
Well, it's a curious influence in that as a young person, he had a bizarre university experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had only completed his freshman year at the Agilonian
Right.
when the Nazi invasion and occupation took place.
The decapitation of Polish culture.
That was the attempt. Now, the university reconstituted itself as an underground university,
Right.
and he continued his undergraduate studies, and in that way, he had 1 year of normal seminary in 1945, 1946. Then he got into a more normal, if the Roman university system can be considered normal, university experience at the Angelicum in Rome, where he did his first doctorate. But it's when he comes back to Poland, does the second doctorate, the so-called habilitation, which is basically a matter of writing another dissertation, and at the Agilonian, where he was the last habilitation thesis in theology to be accepted before the communists shut down the theology department. It's when he goes to Lublin, which was this remarkable little place, a couple of hours east of Krakow, the only Catholic university in the entire communist
Right.
world,
That's right.
or where his friend, colleague, Professor Stefan Sierzowski, said to me, our department was the only place between East Berlin and Seoul, South Korea, where philosophy was free. So this is a university on the edge here, in a very distinctive way. And he loved it. He never lived there. He was a commuter professor. But he loved it, and it had an enormous impact on him, as of course did his chaplaincy work with students in Krakow between the first and second doctorates. And a whole lot of stuff that has changed the face of the Catholic Church throughout the world grows out of all that.
Right.
Love and responsibility begins at Lublin. Theology of the body begins at Lublin.
Right.
World Youth Day begins at the parish of St. Florian's, which was the base of his campus ministry. 3 years ago, when my son and I were in Krakow, he to do the photography for the book City of Saints, which introduces you to Krakow through the life of John Paul II. We went to the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of 2 of John Paul II's old kids from those St. Florian days. And at the end of the Mass in Wawel Cathedral, they're gathered there with all of their friends. And I said, from those days, and I said to my son Stephen, I said, you see those people? That's the beginning of World Youth Day. World Youth Day starts with these people. Because when he came to the papacy, and virtually every other bishop in the world said, youth ministry is hopeless, these kids are living on another planet. He said, no, actually, the music may be different, but they're the same people as what I was working with back then. And we now see the results of that and the fruits of that. So it's always very moving for me to be with those people, some of whom have become very close friends of mine. When World Youth Day was in Krakow last summer, I arranged an evening where some of JP2's old kids could meet with a half dozen American bishops, including our friend Cardinal Dolan. And it was just a marvelous evening. Everybody was deeply impressed with everybody else. The bishops were like this. I mean, these are these people. This is the dining room table where he would celebrate Mass occasionally. I mean, their eyes are like this. And one of the old Wojtyła kids, who's now a very distinguished high-energy particle physicist, said to me the next day, "Can we trade bishops? We'd like to have yours."
Let's talk about that in this very same strain of thought. What did Denver '93 mean to this country? I was just in Denver. I'm on the board of the seminary down there. I had some time with Cardinal Stafford. We talked.
Yeah.
I was a newly graduated college freshman in 1993. And I remember going to World Youth Day. And it was that sense of not being alone that you write about in Letters to a Young Catholic. What did John Paul II's courage and vision in coming to Denver instead of maybe to a place nearer to your hometown, what did that mean?
Well, the alternatives were Chicago and Buffalo, because the Bishops' Conference in those days simply didn't think this was possible. Mm-hmm. So one option was to do it in Buffalo, because that was near Canada, so you could cover the debt by Canadian kids. Then there was Chicago, and then Archbishop Stafford said, "No, I want this in Denver."
Right.
And he stepped up, and he sold John Paul II on the idea of doing this, going straight into the heart of secular city and saying, "All right, I'll see you and raise you here." It certainly turned around the Archdiocese of Denver. Denver is one of the great new evangelization dioceses in the country today, and it's full of young people who are very talented and giving their lives to the service of the church.
It's the birthplace of Focus.
The birthplace of Focus, the St. Augustine Institute, the Summit, I mean, go through the list. That all starts in '93. I think it sent an enormous signal to the bishops of the United States. Wait a minute, you can do this. Mm-hmm. So that was very important. I was not there, but it was astonishing. I talked to the guy who flew the helicopter with the Pope into the old Mile High Stadium.
Right.
And he told me that he had not experienced air turbulence like that
since Vietnam. Right.
When he was getting shot at because of the noise from.
One of the voices was me and my brother.
These kids. Well, you guys can make a lot of noise, I'm sure. And the Pope loved it. This little vignette will be in my book, Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life of St. John Paul II. Our last pre-Christmas dinner together in December 2004, I had brought him this big picture book of national parks of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Because he had a thing about picture books. He got the poet's mind.
Right.
So he opens it at the table. And he goes very laboriously, because he was in somewhat tough shape in those days, finds Rocky Mountain National Park in the table of contents and opens it. Rocky Mountain National Park, World Youth Day '93. Bishops said it couldn't be done. I proved them wrong. So he still had some game at the end. And he loved rubbing their noses in it. I mean, you guys said I couldn't do it, and I jolly well did it. I think it was an enormous gift to the church in the U.S. And I don't know. I mean, there have been a couple of World Youth Days that you can point to really enduring impact. I think Paris '97 did make a big difference in starting a lot of renewal movement activity. Czestochowa in '92, is that right? Czestochowa in '92 was the first time you had kids from both sides of the wall together, and that may have had some impact. But I think in terms of measurable, enduring, continuing impact on a local church, it's hard to beat Denver '93. That was really putting the cables on the battery and charging it up.
Cardinal Stafford told me that they didn't even reserve Mile High Stadium until about 5 months out, because they were convinced The American bishops thought maybe 50,000 would come at max. But of course it was millions. It was an amazing
The other amazing thing, I think this is in Witness to Hope, the police chief of Denver said there was not one felony committed in Denver during the entire time the Pope was there.
Amazing.
I mean, the atmosphere that was created was so astonishing. There wasn't a single serious crime in the city, which had been apparently, I think I have this in there, in something of a serious crime wave, and it just stopped.
Right. You know, I'm going to ask somewhat of a rambling question, but it's one that brings us, I think, to the end of our time together. Your friendship to the University of Marion, coming and visiting with us, is really deep. World Youth Day in Denver was about friendship. In fact, I met people there whom I'm still friends with today. John Paul II was a genius at friendship, and you noted that in talking with some of the people that he had under his care when he was a chaplain at St. Florian's, some of his students at Lublin, this kind of thing. And George, in your life, you've been deeply blessed by great friends. You mentioned Father Newhouse, who was he was an extraordinary person, and his influence upon the public life of this country, the work that First Things has done, has just been amazing. John Sr. Wrote once that the purpose of a university is not research, but friendship. And he said, I say it softly, I say it sweetly. It's not research, but it's friendship. And I always say to our professors here that our work is to have a communion of friends who are inviting students into that friendship, into that community. And so when we talk about the moral import of the intellectual pursuit that a university is involved in, it's about friendship. And I wonder if you might offer some thoughts about friendship, because you've been a blessed person. You've been friends with John Paul II, Father Newhouse, so many other people. And in your friend, Cardinal Dolan, in your friends, certainly you've drawn riches, and you've given those riches back to us through your work, through your speaking, through your writing. Talk to us about friendship and its importance in the life of a university and in the life of a missionary disciple.
Well, let's begin with John Paul II. One of the most interesting things that was said to me when I was preparing Witness to Hope was said by this striking character, Sister Amelia Ehrlich, whom I describe at some length in Lessons in Hope. She was his English tutor. She ran his private library in the Vatican. She was a biblical scholar of some considerable competence. But she said to me once when we were talking about him, she said there's a curious singularity in his life. Every time he's about to have a big spiritual experience, something bad happens. His mother dies right before he's going to make his first communion. His brother dies right before he's confirmed. He's discerning the priesthood, his father dies. He's about to be named a bishop, and his friend Marian Yavorsky is filling in for him at some function, gets hit by a train and loses his arm. He's about to be elected pope. His best friend in Rome, then Archbishop Andre Descours, has a terrible stroke and is essentially rendered mute the rest of his life. And what she said, he was orphaned many times. And I think that in part, there's two facets to that. One is that's the call to him to be ever more fully dependent on the Lord. But it's also a human reason why he cherished his friendship so much. While always recognizing that his closest friend had to be the Lord Jesus Christ.
Right.
So you've got this image of him climbing through the Tatras in the south of Poland with these young people in the 50s and 60s. I mean, when he was the Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow. And, all day long he'd be part of the gang and singing and joking and talking and whatnot. But they would tell me at the end of the day he would drift back to the end of the line to be by himself with the closest friend, because that was the hour that made all the other hours of his day possible. And I think there's a lesson in that for all of us. So many natural human communities have been broken down by the acids of modernity. Very few of us grow up in extended families anymore. People are scattered all over a very large country. The kids you grew up with, you rarely see again. The people you went to high school and college with, you rarely see again. In that kind of a fractured environment, Christian friendship, which is a friendship of the soul and the heart as well as of the mind and the spirit, is terribly important. Mm-hmm. And as you say, I have been richly blessed by friendships that touched all of those dimensions of our lives. My closest friends tend to be the people I work with in a variety of ways. Academically, ecclesiastically, politically, and whatnot. And that's good, because in this air turbulence that we're experiencing all over the place right now, that ongoing conversation, what's going on, what should we be doing, how do we respond to this, how can we, as Richard used to say, we're going to turn this around. How are we going to turn this around? That's very important, both to maintaining morale and to keeping your mind fresh. It's very easy after a certain point to start repeating yourself. And some repetition is necessary.
Mater est studiorum.
Well, it was Samuel Johnson. Mankind more often needs to be reminded than instructed.
Right.
However, a little openness to new insight keeps the juices flowing. And that's why I value my contact with university life around the country and indeed around the world. I cannot imagine living in an environment that didn't have a university in it. I mean, that would just be impossible for me. I mean, I need that kind of surround and the kind of people you find in that sort of surround. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to do that, even though I happily escaped formal academic life in 1977 and have not looked back since. But I'm glad to be a kissing cousin of the Academy.
I hope you feel refreshed and consoled to be here at the University of Mary.
To be at the University of Mary even for 24 hours after a week in Washington, D.C. is balm and water in the desert.
Welcome to the real America, George.
Thank you. Good. Thanks very much.
We're really pleased to be here again on our university's feast day, on the Feast of the Annunciation of the Lord, with George Weigel, a public intellectual, the biographer of John Paul II, and a friend of the University of Mary. George, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.